Today, we're going to break down a pretty major shift in how companies are handling their data. We're talking about moving away from this idea of a massive, centralized data lake and towards something a lot more agile and distributed, called a data mesh. So let's just dive right in with a question that, I think plagues a ton of organizations. Companies are pouring millions, sometimes billions, into becoming data-driven, right? But the results, they often feel kind of underwhelming. So what's going on? Well, the answer really lies in a big architectural flaw that we've been dragging along with us for decades. Yeah, to really get how we got here, we got to look at a little bit of history. First-gen data warehouses, super expensive, super clunky. Then the second-gen came along and gave us the data lake. It promised this single source of truth, but let's be honest, it often just turned into a messy data swamp. And here's the kicker. Even now, with all these amazing modern cloud tools, this third generation is still often built on that same flawed, centralized idea. And that brings us, to the main culprit, the monolithic data lake. I mean, it is the most common approach out there today. And look, it was well-intentioned for sure, but its centralized design, it's just fundamentally broken when you try to scale it up in a big, complex company.
The idea, it seems so simple, so elegant, right? Hey, let's just put all of our data from every single source system into one giant pool. And then boom, our data scientists, our analysts, they can get everything they need from one spot. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. This centralized model, it fails in three super predictable ways the second you try to scale it. First, that single central platform, it immediately becomes a massive bottleneck. Second, the data pipelines are all tangled up, so tightly coupled that one tiny change creates this huge ripple effect. And third, you end up creating this siloed team of hyper-specialized data people who are totally disconnected from what the business actually does.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly highlights the human cost of that third point. You get this single, completely overworked team that's just stuck in the middle. They're trying to serve everybody, but because they don't have that deep domain knowledge, they're basically set up to fail. They become this permanent bottleneck.
So here's the fundamental design flaw, right? The architecture is organized completely wrong for how businesses actually change. Let's say you want to add just one new piece of data, like podcast play rates. To do that, you have to make changes at every single step of the pipeline: ingestion, cleansing, aggregation, serving, all of it. One small update forces you to touch the entire system. It creates this massive friction and huge delays.
So how do we fix this? Well, we can't just tweak the existing model. It's not going to work. We need a complete paradigm shift. We have to move away from that centralized monolith and towards a distributed architecture. And that is the data mesh.
And the core change here, it's a complete flip in how we think about this stuff. Ownership moves from that central team out to the business domains, the people who actually know the data best. So instead of one team pushing all the data in, you have individual teams serving their data out for others to just come and pull. The whole model gets turned completely on its head.
Now, this new architecture, it's not just one single idea. It's actually built on the convergence of three really powerful concepts. Concepts that have already, by the way, totally transformed how we build modern software.
So how does this actually work? Well, the data mesh is really the intersection of three big ideas. First, distributed domain-driven architecture. Second, treating your data like a product. And third, having a self-serve platform that makes it all possible. Let's break each one of these down.
All right, first up, domain ownership. This is probably the most fundamental shift of all. We're talking about decentralizing data ownership and getting it out of the hands of that single central team.
So what this means is that the teams who create and really understand the data, they're now responsible for it. So think about the media player team, for example. They don't just dump raw clickstream data into the lake anymore. No, now they own it, they clean it, and they serve high-quality player data directly to anyone who needs it. It's a total shift from push and ingest to serve and pull.
Okay, our second big shift. This one's maybe the most critical of all because it's about a change in mindset. For this whole distributed model to work, we have to stop treating data like some messy byproduct of our applications. We have to start treating it like a first-class product with real customers and real quality guarantees.
So what exactly makes something a data product? Well, it has to have these key qualities. It's got to be discoverable, so people can actually find it. It needs to be addressable, with a standard way to access it. It has to be trustworthy, with clear quality metrics. It needs to be self-describing, so you know what you're looking at. Interoperable, so you can combine it with other data. And of course, secure. The whole point is that a data scientist should be able to do all this without ever having to file a ticket with a central team.
Okay, so right about now, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, won't this just create total chaos with every team doing their own thing? And that is a great question. And it's where the third and final piece of this puzzle comes in. So, to make all this possible without creating that chaos, a central infrastructure team provides a self-serve data platform. Now, listen closely. Their job is not to own the data. Their job is to provide the domain-agnostic tools, the storage, the pipeline engines, the security controls that make it super easy for all those domain teams to build, deploy, and manage their own high-quality data products. They're enablers, not gatekeepers. So when you bring all three of these things together, domain ownership, data as a product, and a self-serve platform, you start to see that data mesh, well, it isn't just a new technical diagram. It is a fundamental change in how we think about data, about ownership, and about responsibility at scale.
And this quote really gets to the heart of that new mindset. It's an inversion of what we used to care about. The main focus, the first-class concern, is now the domain data product itself. And all that other stuff, the data lake tooling, the pipelines, that becomes a second-class concern. It's just an implementation detail, not the fragile center of the entire universe. Which, of course, leads to the big question, so what happens to my data lake? Does it just go away? And the answer is no, it doesn't disappear. It just gets demoted. It's no longer the center of the data universe. Instead, it just becomes another node on the mesh, maybe a specialized one, owned by a specific domain for a specific purpose. And that really leaves us with one final question to think about. As you look at your own organization's data strategy, you have to ask yourself, are we just building another centralized monolith and basically repeating the mistakes of the past? Or are we actually building for a distributed, product-oriented future?